Good morning. Welcome to the June 23rd meeting of the Archive Committee. We had no minutes to approve. There was no quorum for the meeting in May, and we skipped the meeting in April and skipped the meeting in May. First thing on the agenda is continued conversation about conservation assessments. So I guess, morning, Tom. Where do we stand on assessments?
Ours are, have visited,
Good.
the places they're going to be assessing, and we just now have to do dates of the purchase order.
Okay.
They know what collections they're assessing and have visited both. Abby gave a tour of downstairs and my team gave a tour over at the library.
Okay. And Emma, same
Yes, yeah.
in progress.
Do we have a deadline,
Yesterday.
Well, I mean,
like now?
we need it, you know.
Okay,
It really relates to knowing space for
Mhm.
fundraising. Yeah.
Fundraising and also real estate.
Yeah.
yeah.
How much space do we need? Well, that's a question.
Barbara Moore came to Carter Center last week, and that was what we ended on. She's like, I've got everything, what's your deadline? So I'll tell her
Yesterday.
now, please.
Yes.
Ian, what's your timeline looking like? Cause I imagine your process will take the longest.
Well, Peggy Hodges is helping her.
Oh, great.
Nice. So I'm hoping that will help a little bit.
Okay.
And, she hasn't given me the quote for the PO yet, so
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
yeah, I'll get the date on that.
Okay. I guess the big thing I want to cover today is the basically the articles of agreement and the bylaws. And this is what we worked on with the lawyer from Perwood. I forget her name. Sussman, yeah. And so I guess we really need to look at it and because we want to get back together with her and finalize it. So maybe we can go through things page by page. Is that useful? So
Have you Vince to help walk people through it if that'd be helpful to you?
sure.
Great.
Yeah, so I think as a lot of you know, a small working group of this committee met with, as Vince said, met with the attorney that is helping to form this entity. Just to talk big picture, how this entity is set up as it relates to the four founding members, as we're calling them, is thus really the founding members, really the only job that they have to do, and that would be probably buying through, you know, executive director, city manager, is to formalize the appointment of the board of directors, right? And then once the board of directors is appointed, the way this document is set up, the board of directors basically takes it from there, so that the executive directors and city managers, as busy as they are, aren't involved in the day-to-day, month-to-month of this entity. The board of directors then kind of takes over, and then this document, these two documents really provide the structure for the entity. The Articles of Agreement, just to take that at Portsmouth Archival Research Center, Inc. ARC, I guess, is that the name that everyone here?
Well, we're not going to
agreed
use
upon?
the acronym because PARC is already used in the city.
Sure.
Last time we discussed it, we had agreed just Portsmouth Archive Center.
Portsmouth Archive Center.
Yeah.
All right.
And well, I thought we wanted researching that. But for an acronym, we could use ACK.
why do we care so much about
I'm sorry?
that? Why is an acronym so important?
It isn't.
Good, then let's not worry about it.
Yeah, I know. So,
But I think Portsmouth Archives Center is,
Archive Center,
yeah, just perfectly straightforward.
Portsmouth Archive.
archival,
Just I would just do archive center,
I would too.
Archive singular or plural?
singular.
Well, in this case, probably plural.
Archives. Archives
Because we have
Center.
four.
That's a collection of,
4 units.
yeah.
Right, but it's 4 units as one.
as one. I like to think of it as one.
To do it.
Archive Center.
Okay.
Gonna vote on.
What
Yeah.
about, how many want plural? Supposed to raise your hand.
Really don't care. I won't be allowed to see it.
We hope to be there before that.
Yes.
Portsmouth Archive Center, all right.
So
Before we, before we vote final on this. I'm curious as to, I think I may be the only one that wants to have research in the name. And I'm curious, you do too? I'm curious as to the people that don't want to have research in the name, why?
it's redundant. You
Right.
haven't-
It is
I think
redundant.
it's implied with an
Before.
archive.
Okay.
I would also say implied with the center too, that there's a idea of
Mhm,
more than just one thing happening there.
mhm.
We can later develop a tagline for
Yeah.
marketing purposes.
And just a strong identity as the work begins. People will know what it is, no matter what we call it. Would be the goal.
Oh, no, people will be totally confused about what it is.
Sure, in the very beginning, but then everyone will know.
You have an optimistic point of view.
Today,
I don't really.
I take advantage of it.
I don't care if we have it in there, but it feels narrowing to me in
Mhm.
that we could have displays and
Yeah.
parties, not really,
Yeah.
but you know,
Right.
it feels like, well, somebody's gonna go, oh, I'm not doing research. I don't
Oh,
do
yeah.
research. I
Yeah.
can't go there.
Yeah.
Yep.
It just feels a little
Yep.
more.
Excluding,
restricted to me.
yeah.
Okay.
With transcription parties.
Yes, you're the only one.
Not sure, the only parties will have in there, yeah.
That's all right. I'm happy to go, and there's one advantage to that, in that our friend George, who isn't here today, has reserved the domain name Portsmouth Archive
Oh,
Perfect.
.org.
Good for George.
great.
So, and he's had that since we started. I tried
He's
to
a
get
smart
that, and
guy.
I couldn't get it because he had gotten it.
Yeah, and he told me he's ready to release it anytime we want it.
Yeah, whenever we want it. So when.
Is that the guy who usually sits
Yeah.
over here?
Yeah. So as we start fundraising, we probably should.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm sure, and unless we piss him off somewhere, you know.
That's actually more.
So do we decide singular or plural?
Singular.
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 I think we ought to do that pretty quickly with him.
Okay. He's not, he got it for us.
You got it for us, so that's good.
Yeah,
And people will know it by an acronym anyway. It'll still be called PAC, I'm sure, at some point down the road. Probably will. Just how people's mind think.
Is this something that we need to vote on, that we need to record the vote?
It's with
Or we
Archive
want
Center
to
Inc.
kick the can down the road a little bit more?
no,
It's an
Let's not pick-
instruction to the lawyers, right?
Yeah.
it's an
goes
instruction
into
to the lawyer, and I will scratch out research on mine. Oh,
If you just use the first 2 letters of each word, it's the Porky.
There you go.
Not a good term in a city agency.
Thank you, Tom. That's it, yeah.
Oh, God, this committee. Great, well, we got past the first sentence.
Adjourned.
So,
Plan to be here all day?
okay, so the next part is the purpose of the corporation. This was drafted by the lawyers over at Hurwit. The change that the working group made was to add in addition to Portsmouth, New Hampshire and the Piscataqua region. Just to broaden the scope of the potential purpose of the entity, to include a little bit more than just Portsmouth.
Yep.
But the rest of it was, again, just drafted by the lawyers out there.
What towns are included in the Piscataqua region?
I think it's intentionally vague.
Yes.
If it touches the river or the bay, it's potentially there.
And if,
If you go to Exeter-
You're up in the
Yeah.
Lakes region.
And sometimes we want that.
Yes.
you may want to be able to argue that the Lamprey River is part of it, right?
Yes,
You know,
absolutely.
Yeah, Squamscott, yeah, who knows what.
Winnipesaukee is in the Portsmouth Customs District.
Customs District.
Well, where else would it be?
You and Adrian.
Okay, so.
So third,
So, yeah, that is on, you have to look at the continuation pages. And that just lists the 4 founding members. And we can talk later about, we have the bylaws about adding or removing members. Been a topic of debate. Certainly.
yeah,
Fourth, that's the provisions, those are the provisions for disposition of corporate assets. I had made sure to put in here appropriate provisions for real estate in order to protect any charitable exemption that may be applied for. That was that's kind of my big overriding concern when I look through this, because that'd be substantial, obviously.
well, and if ultimately, if somehow the city owns the property or or has a long-term lease.
Yep.
That affects that too, right?
Sure, but it has to be everybody has to qualify.
Mhm.
Everybody using the property, so it has to be the property owner and any tenants. They all have to independently qualify for the charitable tax exemption in order for the property to be exempt.
Okay,
So,
It can't be apartment dwellers, individual apartment. dwellers.
debatable. I mean, now you're really getting into it, but it couldn't be, some entity that very clear, like the city, very clearly would apply. But if the tenant was, real estate developer for, Green and Company, for example, then the property would not
No.
qualify for the charitable tax exemption. But there are times when apartments could qualify as tax for the charitable tax exemption, depending on the circumstance. It'd have to be within the purpose of the organization.
Why does that hold after dissolution?
Well, because that's one of the factors. One of the factors in is this elder trust test
Okay,
that you have to apply, and one of them is how corporate assets, how real estate will be handled upon dissolution. It's one of the tests there. We'll get to other tests, other prongs of that test as we move along through the document.
And if Porky ends up leasing from the city, then they don't own the property.
They don't, if they're leasing the property, they don't own it, but they're still they still have to pass the test, I guess. So like the Repertory Theater, that's a great example, because they don't own it, but the owner of the property has to qualify and the rep has to
I
qualify.
get it.
Yeah, so fifth, so I offered just to have the office, for the city attorney's office to accept any documentation that needs to be mailed to the organization, at least up front. That can always be changed later on, but it seemed like a reliable place for it to go, I guess. They still be there, I guess. This is a charter amendment. Yeah, there's no capital stock. Seventh, so we thought it was important to put in here, or the working group thought it was important to put in here, pretty reasonable indemnity clause for any directors. Especially many of the directors, if not all of them, will be, serving on a volunteer basis. It seemed important to protect their personal liability unless, of course, they do something
Illegal.
awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something real bad. But so long as they're acting within the scope, and that tracks kind of, at least from the city side, it tracks with You know, the indemnity inherently, for elected officials.
Is that the bar that if someone on a board is paid, there's more liability than if you're volunteer?
No, certainly not.
Oh, okay.
Certainly not. No, it varies by organization. I mean, the organization has the discretion to change that. I mean, some have quite strong indemnity clauses, some have none at all.
Mhm.
You know, it's really just falls under the freedom of contract, right?
But someone volunteering might hesitate if there were not such.
Not,
provisions.
right.
If they thought they might have incur some personal liability if they make a mistake, right?
Yep.
Next, and this is probably the part where we need to have some conversation here is who is going to, basically, who are the incorporators of this entity? When this came to us initially, it was just a bunch of people down in the Hurwitz and Associates law firm. I mean, it really doesn't matter from a legal perspective who signs this. You just need at least 5 people to sign it. You can have more. And I think Chuck had the really good idea of, you know, opening it up to the committee and who wants to put their name on it. Just, you know, I was here at the beginning kind of thing.
They have to be residents of New Hampshire.
Correct, yeah. Yes.
How do they,
No, they don't have to be resident. They have to be residents of New Hampshire. I don't.
I'm asking.
Oh, no, I don't believe that's, sorry, I don't know why I agreed with you, Chuck. No, I don't believe that they do.
Why are you?
I just instinctively agreed with you. That was weird.
That's soft fit.
That didn't make sense. That didn't.
Pretty soft fit.
Thanks, Chuck. No, they don't have to be residents of New Hampshire. I know the answer to that.
No,
Vince, what you
thought
suggesting
they did.
everybody on the committee?
So,
I
you
don't
know,
believe
it's,
that's true.
it was my thought, and I think we talked about it, that it's kind of an honorary position.
Exactly.
There's no liability, and that we thought that the whole committee, the original committee should be part of it, including ex officio Strawberry Bank. So,
Wait, why am I ex officio?
well, because
Officially,
you were not appointed by the mayor.
Oh, that's right.
Sorry. You don't come to me.
But Elizabeth is, right? Elizabeth
Yeah,
is,
Elizabeth.
okay.
We're in.
We're I'm like, wait.
Your name's in the document, don't worry.
So if everyone agrees with that, I guess the thing to do is then make sure we have everyone's information that is needed.
Yes.
To fill this form out.
Should the city manager also as the leader of the city, since this is,
I have a meeting with her
Something?
later this week to talk about this document. I can bring that up in my conversation with her.
So should we all email you our addresses?
Yeah,
I think you probably have them.
well, I,
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, because
um,
I'll gotta submit that when we're on.
I don't know that I have them. I think I have your work addresses.
Is that what we use?
Is that what we should be using, work address rather than personal?
I mean, it's not clear, doesn't say. I think you could use
Well, I
either.
mean, they're representing institutions.
Yes.
Right.
I-
I'd lean towards
Yeah, me
worse.
too.
I would put One Junkins Ave if I were doing it.
address, yeah.
Okay. I might have all that.
So that brings us,
Where to find us if you don't.
Yeah,
I think we don't until we have your address. So that brings us to the bylaws. We have the name, which I will track with the Portsmouth Archive Center. Again, the office address is going to initially be Office of the City Attorney. Which the working group wanted to change the fiscal year to match the fiscal year that I think everyone is on. No?
Not quite, but it just.
That's a good
moves us-
fundraising, it's good for
one.
fundraising, yes. It's what the city's on, July 1 to June 30th. As opposed to January 1
Real
to
ones,
December
right.
31st, right?
Mhm.
Which is fine. Statement of purpose, that matches what's in the Articles of Incorporation. The members section, this is where, you know, it's listed as members, because that's a term of art, that's what's listed in the statute, but then it's redefined, as you'll see when you read through it, as founding members. I think
We had kind of argued with her on this one.
Yeah.
Just wasn't familiar with the concept.
I'm sorry?
She's fine with it. She's put it in here.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that lists obviously the 4 entities, and then there are provisions for adding new members, and then later on, we'll see there are provisions for removing members, founding members, but only for cause. So it couldn't just be that 3 entities are annoyed with the 4th and they just want to get rid of them. That would stink after all the work everybody's put in. So. Terms, obviously, the founding members are going to be serving indefinitely. No terms for the founding members. Powers, really, again, the powers of the founding members are really just to add or remove other founding members or to appoint the board of directors. That's really it. Meetings, they do have to meet, the founding members do have to meet annually. Again, I envision that that's just probably by Zoom. It'd be between the executive directors and the city manager, right? Straightforward. Proxy voting allows for meetings by remote communication, as I said.
I ask a question about this, where the founding members, we as individuals are founding members, but we're representing the membership.
No.
No,
The founding members are the 4 entities.
Okay, that's good. So on here, the founding members are listed.
Those are incorporators.
Those are
incorporators.
Yes, then.
Okay, that makes sense.
Incorporators are there just to form the entity and then they go away.
So the entity can within the entity choose
Yeah, we don't,
who's
the
representing.
incorporators don't do anything after.
Right.
They're just submitting the application to the state.
So it's whoever has authority to act on behalf of the founding members.
Each member.
So and that'll be up to everybody.
That I wasn't.
Yeah, that'll be up to everybody to determine who that'll be for the city. It'll be the city manager. And if she needs extra authority to do anything, she'll go ask for it from the city council. Yeah, so again, there's some provision to act without a meeting, in the case of emergency or what have you. Waiver of notice, resignation. Now we get to resignation and removal. I mean, there kind of has to be the ability for any entity to resign. I mean, we can't trap people in this. But in terms of removal, that's subject to these 4 cause provisions here. Which it's kind of hard to parse when some of these would occur, when an entity could commit some of these things, right? But I mean, it certainly could happen. It's hard to divorce perhaps the individual from the entity in some of these cases, but anyway, these are just kind of the standard 4 cause provisions that were provided by Attorney Sussman. If anybody has any comments on it, certainly have to take them back. Pretty standard to me.
I had a question on this in the previous draft. If a founding member exits, do they forfeit the physical materials that are in possession of the?
No, and again, remember any agreement to hold physical documents is outside the scope of what we're reading here. That will be under an individual contract between, for example, the Athenaeum and Porky, as you say. That would be like part of the contract. So the contract term would dictate how that goes.
Trevor, just before we leave this part of it, I think it's pretty important that we get that name transferred to us as soon as possible, because if we file this, Secretary of State's gonna say somebody else owns the name. That's important that we do that soon.
Okay.
And so I'll
They
call
check
George.
domain names?
Not just the domain name, the register.
Oh, the
Secretary of
registered
State.
name.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Secretary of State's office.
Yeah. Can we do that without putting this in? And we have-
Yes, you can
You
get,
can sign up any name in your head as long as somebody else doesn't have it already.
And he can assign it to us as,
Mhm.
that's a question, who is he assigning it to?
Parky.
That's an issue, because when they file it,
Mhm.
that's gonna come up.
Who's it being assigned to? Yeah.
Well, it doesn't have to be a legal entity. Because it's just a business registration, so you would just sign it to the Portsmouth.
Yeah, and as the register, I mean, you know, either Susan or I'll be the registered agent, at least initially.
Okay,
And then, you know, we can always, when
Hold it.
the executive director or chair of the board or what have you, we can always assign things over to them, but for now, we'll just be the registered agent.
Mhm.
Quick question on the for cause sections.
Please.
So a lot of what she seems to have here feels like it was written for an individual rather than a organization. And so like, I'm wondering about 6 and 7, which are obviously not good, but are we saying if there was a bad actor within an organization, the entire organization could be kicked out?
it's a good point.
Sure, and yeah, what happens, for example, if, you know, an organization is you know, the Human Rights Commission, for example,
Right.
finds, yeah, that an individual member, you know, totally unrelated.
Mhm.
Or there, you know, there's a bad executive director at some point who is accused of embezzlement, right? Like
A
that's
common.
back to, right, that's back to the organization to take care
Take
of,
care of that.
to take care of that, but it doesn't feel like the organization should be removed. I mean, I am asking that because it obviously would not look.
It happens.
Frankly, I think that's a very good point.
I
I
think
think
it's a good
look
point,
at
too.
every one of these in that light.
Yeah.
I mean, a counter argument would be, there's also the check of, you know, it would take a vote of the other three organizations.
Organizations, right,
They'd all have to agree that that's something meriting removal of a member.
right.
Um,
But like you were saying, for the city side, if there was an elected or like,
City might
could
have
the other
different
three
intentions.
use it as a way of inappropriately
Sure,
getting?
I mean, you know, one parking attendant does some, you know,
Right.
takes some discriminatory act against another, and now that's used as leverage to remove the city from this organization. That wouldn't make sense, right?
Right.
No, I'm with you.
And I think
That's a good point.
building on that too, I can't remember if this is captured in there, but if there is a bad actor in terms of an individual that we want to replace, but keep the organization involved. So say
Right.
there's a bad director, but you say we still want
Yeah.
to keep Portsmouth Historical, but we want to have
Yep.
assign a new,
Replace
that.
that person with a new person from the same agency, right?
Yeah, do we have the?
Or I mean, you know, yeah, I'd have to think about how to structure that, but I get your point. Point well taken,
Right.
for sure.
So I just searched this State Department's for a business name of Portsmouth Archive Inc. And couldn't find one.
Congratulations.
Excellent.
So how do I go about,
Reserve
Portsmouth Archive Center.
huh?
Center.
Oh, well,
This was Archive Center, that's one.
I'm assuming since Portsmouth Archive didn't come up,
yeah,
so not, but.
they reserve it with the Secretary of State or as a domain name.
George has the domain name, but we can register
Mhm. Gotcha.
the business name.
Do we have contact information for George?
I do. No, so Portsmouth Archive Center does not come up.
Good, that's what you want. You
Yeah.
don't want ink.
So maybe I'll work with you after the meeting and just
Sign you up.
sign up.
Okay, so no fees associated with being a member. And that brings us to the board of directors structure. You know, and again, this is kind of the inverse of the membership structure that we talked about earlier. The board of directors basically have authority to do the rest of it, right? Everything else. There'll be 11 directors, 8 appointed by the founding members, and then the others will be kind of at large. You'll see later on that there's a nomination committee as a part of this. So terms of office, I'm not sure this totally memorialized what we discussed with her. You know,
Because it's complex, because the city has to have one
because the
thing.
city has to have its own member, term. Because one of the members is appointed by the city council and the city council runs on 2-year terms. And the kind of the working group had agreed that 3-year terms was better.
So maybe the city council member is the only one that doesn't have to be.
Well, yeah, and the other one was
So, but the city staff,
the city staff could be kind of, as long as that person is employed by the city, or it could be a short amount of time, right?
Yeah. yeah, I don't think we can ask the city manager to appoint someone different every 2 years.
Right. Yeah, and then also given that there is a limit on allowing people to only be able to serve 2 consecutive terms. The thought was having the city staff person around helped with some of the continuity there, you know, they could bring. Yeah, exactly, they could kind of bring new members along, and they could have, especially given how big the board is, you know, that person can have you can hold down kind of the history of the corporation. And then you cycle in new, you know, fresh blood from each of the other organizations.
That's right.
But that wasn't really reflected in here. I'll have to talk to her about how to.
Seems to me there's some risk of having no limitations to successive terms.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think, again, once again, the city,
Up here, there is, so that's what we were talking about, right?
we're talking about 2-year terms. Two,
3-year terms.
Mhm.
3-year terms.
Mhm.
And so
Okay.
that's what we wanted to see, and
Yeah.
I guess this first paragraph is just giving the city flexibility.
Hmm.
Yeah. You know, and I mean, just thinking about the different communities out there where there's a city employee kind of serving on the board of directors, I mean, there are some circumstances where they change over somewhat frequently. But then, I mean, I know Peter Britt's the Director of Planning and Sustainability, he's been on the Coakley Landfill Group for 20 years.
Mhm.
You know, and there's value to that, right?
Yeah.
Because that's so complicated, it's such a complicated issue.
And what's the balance too, in terms, because I hear Jeff and I wish other bodies would consider this too, term limits, but the balance of that with the independence of each member organization to make a decision as to who is the best representative of that organization.
For my part, you know, for the city's part, I would just trust in the discretion of the city manager to appoint somebody who's passionate about it. You know, she's not gonna wanna put somebody on this that doesn't wanna do it, right? I mean,
Well, it depends who hires the city manager at some point.
fair. We've had a pretty good run,
Well.
in my opinion.
Yeah, I think when we got to the second paragraph, that was what the nonprofits were more used
Yeah.
to seeing, like having those term limits.
Okay, well, I'll speak with Attorney Sussman again and see if we can come up with something, or if this works for everybody, I mean.
I mean, it's really not clear what it's saying, though, right?
That first paragraph.
That-
So it feels like the
That's the
first
real
paragraph
issue,
contradicts
right.
the second.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does, yeah.
And, you know, I mean,
Better to clean it up.
the terms of city council members is unlikely to change anytime soon. So, you know, you
right.
could even just say that, you know, the city
Right.
shall have 2 spots and these are how the 2 spots will be appointed.
Yeah, I think that would be,
Yeah.
You know, just spell it out,
And kind of just spell that out separately.
and then
from-
for everybody else, here's what you do.
feels, yes.
Have just 2 sections, really. I mean, just make it nice and clear.
But I think that we should have limitations for the city as well, though.
Okay, what would you suggest?
Why?
2 terms, because we do for the
Yeah.
other directors.
Look at the bread example and he just uses an example of a city person being on it forever.
Peter Britz.
different entity.
And as part of their, and for that particular position, it's not someone volunteering their time. It's someone who's being paid
Paid to go to those meetings.
to go to those meetings. It's part of their job.
Mhm.
And if they're not doing a good job, if they're, then they're not doing a good job in their job, and that should be reported to their manager, right? I mean, if
Mhm.
they're not fulfilling their duties. I think it's a little bit different.
With the city council, that's pretty,
Right, that'll
Pretty
take care of
clear.
itself.
that's an
Yeah.
elected.
A lot of people are serving,
Change it.
more than 6 years consecutively on the city council.
Not many.
Not many. It happens, but
It happens,
not a
yeah.
lot.
But I could see where you could make an exception for a city employee.
Yeah,
But that means that the member organizations are obligated to not make the director the representative for
It's
more
true.
than 2-3-year terms,
true.
right? So if you have a director who's been there for 10 years and you
Yeah.
want them to be your rep, this says you can't.
It's true.
Problem.
Yeah,
Could it be one of the two has the term limit and the other doesn't? Would that make sense legally?
I mean, sure, you can structure it however you want. You think about it a little bit. I mean, maybe you could come up with some, just some provision, except that if the board member is an employee of the founding member, then the term limit provision shall not apply. And then it gives the power
But
to
there
the
may be
founding member.
times when you want to apply.
Right.
So,
Yes.
That's the problem.
Right.
so,
I think making it one of the two will cover it for
Yeah.
everybody.
separate the two out.
And then the at-large would be subject to the term limits?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
just want to be.
I mean, we have directors of 3 members here, so
Mhm.
would you want to be a member and not have a term limit? Or would you want to be appointing?
I like the idea of getting a year off after 6.
It's like the weight on my calendar.
I mean, you guys,
Which I feel like you could still do.
Right.
You could cycle someone else in, you just wouldn't be beholden to
Right,
the
and you'd still be informed.
Right.
6-year, it gives, because again, to the point of, we're all, the directors who are here, we're being paid to be here in the way that volunteers aren't, so it gives us, I could see it either way. I could see the
You
benefit of
just-
term limits, or if you say, I've been on it for 3 years, but now I'd like my curator to step into the role for a
Right.
year or two, and then when I'm ready to cycle up, and that will also help with any time there isn't, if there's any vacancies in executive directorships,
Mhm.
it allows
Have
another,
enough people and.
To fill in, right.
yeah, to step in until
Yeah.
a new one was assigned,
And
so,
you would be
Yeah, I'm
able to
not-
stay involved, you just wouldn't have a vote.
right.
Right. And I think that, I mean, this idea of getting different eyes and skill sets kind of rotating onto the board is an important one. So I feel
Yeah.
fine.
I mean, I think same with the library, same thing.
Well, and the library director would not necessarily be the member appointed by the city manager.
Right,
As you were saying, it would depend on interest. It could be that
What's
they.
going on with the organization too? I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
there may be some years where, it makes sense to have the library director on there, and there may be other years where, a different perspective is needed.
And they put our special collections librarian or
yeah,
something. on.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But for my part, I'd want the manager to be able to have that discretion, right? I'd want her to have, I wouldn't want her to just be unduly restricted, like, wow, we could really use, the library director on, there's some really important decisions coming up in the next year or two. And we really want the library director to be involved, but, there's this term limit thing on there and now I can't, I've got to cycle her off for somebody else just for, that would be my concern, I guess, but.
Well, and I guess that's a concern for each organization too.
Exactly.
Yeah, it kind of ties the hands of the organization. I take your meaning and I know of things, not Peter Britz, but people who have been library trustees for 40 years.
Yes,
And
exactly.
I really wish to have it for a woman, not my board, not my board. We have
This
to.
is going out, you know.
That's okay.
We all remember.
So I do take your point, but I don't like tying the hands of the member organizations to the point where they, as you were just pointing out, say, this is the person I want representing us on the directors, and I can't do it because they've served 6 years.
Well, the advantage to having the founders all be organizations is that as valuable as we all are, we're not the sole valuable
Right.
people in our organization.
Sure about that.
You have enough, Trevor?
I think so, yeah. We'll have to come back to it,
Yeah.
but. Yeah, so there's a couple things in here. I mean, you know, notice meetings, quorum and voting. I don't know how in depth anybody wants to get into any of these technical provisions. The next item that
It's pretty standard stuff.
is, yeah, the next item that I think merits more conversation is the committees section. Now, this does not constitute all the committees that the entity can constitute and use.
Merely the required.
These are the required ones at first, and these can always be removed by amendment to the bylaws. But at first, everybody, I think, agreed that it would make sense to have an executive committee and a nomination committee. The nomination committee being especially important because you have 3 at-large members who it's not really evident how those 3 people are chosen. But this spells that out a little bit. So I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions about either of these sections.
I do have to excuse myself because I have a 10 o'clock meeting and then a 10:30 meeting.
Of course.
Thank you for coming to the 9 o'clock meeting.
Yes, well, you'll never forget 14 now. Right, and Richard, I got the Woodbury papers yesterday.
Oh, good.
So.
That's good. Also, Thorner's coming to see you sometime in the next week or so with a big pile of things. Let's see what we want.
I could just
Show not.
There you
I
go.
could just see Mark Brighton with Porky, you know, cut the Porky on a sign, you know, rest in peace to Mark Brighton.
I have a question right in the executive committee, first line, it says the executive committee shall consist of the corporation's officers. Okay, I got it. Sorry, I was thinking corporations. I was getting confused with founding members, but that means the president,
Yeah, but
secretary, yeah.
that's a good, this should say founding members.
No, I think corporation is right.
No, it
because
shouldn't
cor-
say, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I
no,
think
you're right.
corporation is right. That's
Yeah,
what
you're
was got. Yep. Where this section spells out officers somewhere. Yes. Okay, so that's president, treasurer, and others. Okay, great.
Here it said that there would be an annual meeting, but here it doesn't. Here it says the executive committee shall call meetings.
Well, the annual meeting is between the actual founding members.
Yeah.
Well, but
This
the
is the
board should
director.
have an annual meeting too, right?
The board, I think, meets monthly.
Is that
It's annual meeting.
Board have a
It does say-
special?
It says that.
Right. Yeah, the board has has annual meetings, yeah.
Other meetings of the board of directors may be called.
Go on the board.
Where are you?
Committees.
Committees.
410.
Page what?
5.
Under Article 5, Section 5.3 vacancies, should it be, it says a vacancy in any office because of death, resignation, disqualification, or otherwise may be filled by the Board of Directors for the unexpired portion of the term. Is it really of any office, not officer? The vacancy shouldn't be of any officer? Or should it be in any office?
Office.
Yeah, the office would be.
The office?
That's a president office. Secretary.
Okay.
So we're on page 6.
She's looking at Article 5 on page 6.
5-3.
Beating ahead a little bit. So if everybody's okay with the committees, I was kind of.
Yep.
Yeah,
The next would be compet,
So, one thing on removal. If we're going to change cause of removal under the founding members, then maybe we should have specific cause for removal for board members,
I mean, you could certainly do that,
because they would be different,
but yeah, it's different.
right?
Right.
Because then the ones that we're taking out for the founding members would apply for directors. That makes sense?
Or are you saying, put a clause in here, if a founding member is removed, then their 2 members are removed from the board of directors automatically?
Or are you talking about removing directors rather than?
Like,
I'm
yeah,
talking about removing directors, so on section 4,
3, yeah.
1, 3. She's got a comment here asking if she wants us to use,
Right.
and if we're gonna change that, then we would need specific cause for directors.
If you want for cause removal, yes. Yep. You don't have to have, but you certainly can have.
So 413 is not enough for you.
It would give a little more flexibility to the board of directors to act to remove somebody, which could be okay. I think we wanted the more stricter for cause at the founding member level so that where there could be more like political motivation or something like that.
yeah.
Mhm.
But so the board of directors could vote to remove you.
Yep.
From.
But it would take a 2/3 vote of the entire.
2/3 vote.
Okay, I'm good.
But then your organization would have to. Bring someone else forward.
Right.
That'll make your board happy.
I mean, and because it seems to say,
Why did you got a point though, why is the majority of all members part of this? There's 2 ways to do it, by the members or by the board of directors.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Oh,
And
I
members,
see what you mean.
Oh,
do
that's-
members here mean founding members
Yeah.
again? Okay.
Okay.
We don't need that.
It would make sense if it was a majority of, I mean, it doesn't matter, I guess it's only 2/3 is the same as a majority.
Says by a vote of 2/3 of the entire board of directors, and then before that, a majority of all members of the meeting of the members. We got 2 ways to do it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
too,
so-
that's too messy.
No, it's different, because I think I think members refers to founding members.
And
They should
not
say so.
like the
Yes,
member.
but I don't think that should either be a capitalized M or founding members, that should be changed, yeah. And then the second way is 2/3 vote of the board of directors. And that makes sense. Right?
Yeah.
If that members is changed to founding members, okay. Just to circle back a little bit to 4.11, is everybody okay that somebody on somebody on the board of directors could also be an employee of the corporation?
Absolutely,
Often will be.
really need to be.
I'm just making sure. It's not my decision. This commission has to be that way.
Aren't they usually ex officio though? Like, so this is saying the PAC or whatever, right? That is the corporation we're talking about. And so the executive director, like we're executive directors and we're on our board, but we're non-voting.
vote. Yeah.
But that's the 8 members, the 8 directors could include, as we were just discussing, could include you and Tom.
Right, and they should, but this, when it says corporation, it's not talking about our entities, it's talking about
That
the
corporation.
archive center.
Correct.
Right, so really what this is contemplating, right, is that one of the at-large members
Right.
would be the executive director. Or
No.
some other employee of,
No.
The executive
That's
director
what you're
of,
thinking. Pull it
Yeah.
right now.
because what this says is someone on the board of PAC
Yeah.
could be an employee of PAC.
PAC,
Mhm.
and that,
No.
we don't
Oh.
No, we
want
don't
that.
want that.
Pecuniary benefit.
Correct.
Yeah, that's why I was like,
No.
oh,
No.
Got a pecuniary benefit transaction.
Yeah.
Agreed.
No.
So executive director,
Director,
we hire an executive
Executive
director
director.
of PAC,
yes,
they would be ex officio.
ex
Yes,
officio,
officio.
yes.
Agreed.
They call it PAC.
Because you.
Although I guess this could also encompass, you know, if, for example, somebody on the board is a electrician and then they get paid to do electrical work at the
That's a
facility.
pecuniary benefit transaction.
That's a
Pecuniary benefit.
pecuniary, right.
But then if you move on, there are provisions in here relating to pecuniary benefit in Article 10, conflicts of interest, which says no director may receive any pecuniary benefit from any transaction with the corporation except as permitted under New Hampshire law, and only if the transaction is disclosed in advance to the board, director abstains from voting and any attempt to influence the decision, the board determines that the transaction is in the corporation's best interest and fair and reasonable to the corporation. The transaction complies with the conflict of interest policy adopted, if any.
And that's just the
So
thing
that's
we
like-
sign on every board in the city.
Right, and so
And that
that's like if
happens.
you're an electrician or something like that,
Mhm.
right, like you said,
Correct.
but that shouldn't be the executive director of.
No, that'd be different.
Yeah, no.
So, yeah, so I think what it's intending is, yeah, I mean, I can think of a good example, you know, with the music hall, Eric Chinberg was on the board and Chinberg did some work, the company did some work for the music hall. And, but that did not violate the pecuniary interest.
Is he on the
standard.
board?
He was on the board. I don't believe he is anymore.
That's a pecuniary benefit transaction.
Mhm.
And have to give notice, it's right in the statute, that's exactly.
Yeah,
what
so
it
you have
means.
to give notice, exactly, and they gave notice, they did all the right, they took all the appropriate steps. In terms of disclosure, and he wasn't a part of the vote and all the, and. you know,
Yeah, so they
fair- and
followed the
fair mar-
right-
You know,
yeah,
they paid
yes,
fair
yeah.
market for the work, it wasn't less for the work. So it was not, assessor deemed it was not a pecuniary benefit to the individual.
Well, if they did all that, you can do it, but it's an awful lot.
Right, and that's what's spelled out here under Article 10, is you have to do an awful lot.
I don't think this is addressed, and I would wonder how your bylaws are written, Linnea. It's a thought in terms of staff of PAC. I know in our bylaws, it's written that like the board has the authority to hire
Mm.
the executive director.
Yeah.
And my question is that in your bylaws as well, that like empowers, or who it empowers to?
And then the executive director has.
Hires everybody
Hires
else.
everybody else, and that the
basically.
board cannot come in and fire
Right.
a staff member.
But I guess my question for this would be, given the hybrid nature of our center, where does the authority for hiring a director
Well,
come in?
mhm.
With founding members, with board, and should that be in
It's
the
a board.
bylaws?
It's the board that hires.
Yeah, I think it's,
The board is, I didn't see anything specifically, maybe I missed it, about,
hiring.
The board hiring, board of
That are-
directors would hire the staff.
but that specifically says the board can hire staff, or can forget how it's written in our
Right,
bylaws,
is
basically
responsible for.
delegate and hire someone to run the
Yeah, or-
operations, not
yes,
run the organization. And if it's not, is it worth putting in here so
Right.
it's clear on who is responsible?
I've
for
also put
staff?
in that they're authorized to hire a qualified person to do this. I mean, this is a technical
Yeah,
issue.
Yeah, we don't want unqualified people.
Emma, would you want that in the authorities section, section 4.1 on the board?
probably. And that's again, something not knowing what this is gonna look like and how it's gonna be structured. I think we want something that even if it ends up being like a city that we determine for whatever reason that the city is gonna pay the salary of this person,
Mhm.
would we still want the board to be able to
Yes.
be a part of that hiring process, be a part of also, as we experience, like the executive committee who does our reviews and everything like that. And I think that's a question of if we want to be able to hire staff, at least setting it up in the bylaws so that it's clear who is in charge of that process.
Responsible.
The first sentence under the Board of Directors authority is the business and affairs of the corporation shall be controlled and governed by the Board of Directors.
Yeah, and then if you go to Article 6, corporate transactions, the board of directors has the all authority to contract, enter into whatever contracts.
Do you get so far down in the details that it would be again, a 2/3 vote for such hires by the board? Or is it just a conversation? How does, if there's opposing views, how would that conflict be resolved?
Well, it would be the executive director who would hire lower staff, presumably.
Yeah, usually
And
all hiring
not
is
gonna
managed,
Take
but
that to the goddamn whole board.
the way this is written, do you, with the way the authority and the contracts is written, does that making sure that allows the board to oversee staff? Is that,
That's how this is
Is
written
written,
now.
okay.
Written now, the board
Great.
has all, but I mean, they could delegate some of that power through a contract to the executive director.
Right.
okay,
They could.
but I just wanna make sure that contracts would mean
Yep,
executive director as well, so
And
we're
also-
clear the board has
Right.
oversight of.
yeah. So the way this is written now, the board makes all these decisions, you know, for the
Gotcha.
executive director
Okay.
and all staff. There's no, for example, non-interference clause,
Mhm.
like the city has for city councilors and, you know, some organizations have as well.
Yeah, I
you
was just
know.
checking ours and we have an article that says president. And
Mhm.
it says the board of trustees hires the president and evaluates him her annually.
We have a similar thing in our bylaws that specifically states that, but if you feel it's captured between the authority and the contracts, as long as we're,
I mean, they can do
Because
it,
we're not
but
certain.
they don't have an
that-
obligation to
Yeah.
do it.
right, but the way the bylaws are written, they are empowered to do it,
They
to
may-
hire an executive director.
Right.
Great,
Okay.
awesome,
As long
that's
as
all I wanted
they're-
to make sure.
right.
But there's no limit on what the board can do from there, you know, the only limit would be whatever they put in the contract with the executive director or, you know, the board itself could obviously amend these to place more restrictions on themselves later.
Fat chance.
Fat chance, right, you know, nobody likes more restrictions. So if you want that kind of restriction, if you think it's a good idea to have a non-interference
Do it now.
clause, for example, I would do it now. But
Okay.
I'm not as familiar with certainly the day-to-day operations, operating a nonprofit as you two are, so I would defer.
I think a non-interference clause is good.
Mhm.
Do we need it in there? Or does this cover that?
I don't think it covers it.
It doesn't explicitly cover it, you're kind of leaving it to the
The
board.
contract?
Yeah, to the contract with the director that would say the board's not gonna
Do
overstep
X, Y.
into operations and staffing. It sounds like the way both of our bylaws are written, there's a specific provision that says the board can hire an executive director to run the operations of the organization with the understanding that operations means the executive director is in charge of
Mhm.
staff and day-to-day. Is that how, am
Yeah.
I right in capturing that?
Yes, but mine doesn't say, the trustees will not, get into it. It's just, it's just interesting, right? But it does
I
say,
know mine doesn't either, but
but Right, there's
New
no
revision we'll be putting in,
restriction,
yeah.
right, but has
I need to
both
excuse myself in my next meeting.
day-to-day and long-term responsibility for the
Yeah.
direction of the operation, including implementing the strategic and business goals and plans established by the trustees. So it's,
That's pretty clear.
right, it's pretty clear, like,
This subject matter is probably most likely, if anything is gonna break up the family, it would be something like this, right?
right, for the,
In other words, for all the
People were trying to
entities,
take over.
yeah, for all the entities to, kumbaya, everyone's getting along. It seems like this subject matter is probably the strongest chance of causing some sort of rift in the future.
Well, a rift with the executive director for sure,
Right.
right,
but I'm not
but
sure.
that's, the board gets to replace the executive director
Yeah.
if they're not happy with that person.
What's the number one cause of divorce? Money. I mean, when this starts costing a lot, and people don't wanna kick in their fair share, I mean, that's what would cause it to fall apart, right?
Necessarily, it could be other things.
Or I'm just saying the number one risk, I would, in my mind,
Always is money.
Right.
who's gonna pay for it? We don't have enough money. You're not spending the money right, whatever.
You're not raising the money.
Stop
Oh,
going to
right, it's
Stop going to Starbucks every day for coffee. Oh, wait,
Wow.
just kidding.
But I think as is written now, because you can always amend bylaws, we don't have an executive director yet. We don't know that we
don't
can
really know what the
pay
structure
for an
is gonna be.
executive director. Yeah.
You don't know what the structure of this organization is gonna
Right,
be at all yet, so
right.
keeping it
Yeah.
vague is
Okay.
probably good. All right. So corporate transactions, it's all pretty straightforward as we've discussed.
Let's see, where are you now?
Article 6. Article 7, so for right now, any records would be kept by the city attorney's office for now. I mean, that's what the principal place of office is. Restrictions on activities, that's pretty boilerplate. Dissolution, she added in that provision about real property that I had requested.
And I also want to make sure that, and I think we talked about this, but if there's a dissolution that members are not banned from receiving the benefit of the dissolution.
If there's dissolution, there will be no benefit.
Well,
But there's property that
if
has
there's
to
property,
be distributed to everybody.
Yeah.
Someone would have to know.
in other words, I want to make sure that it doesn't have to go to, Crossroads House instead of one of the,
What does the dissolution provision say?
that's what I was just looking.
Dispose of all remaining assets exclusively.
And this
It's pretty
provision,
vague, actually.
it wouldn't restrict it. It basically gives the power to the board of directors to just make that decision at the time of dissolution.
Okay.
As long as it goes to a qualifying organization.
Okay,
Qualified organization is
Oh, it's C3.
Yeah. Right there. Charity, governmental unit, or other entity. Substantially similar charitable purpose.
to go to more than one.
Go to more than one.
Discretion of the board.
Conflicts of interest, I think we talked a little bit about, but some specific questions there. Personal liability and indemnification, I think we talked about a little bit. And last is amendments to the bylaws, which can just be modified by simple majority vote of the board of directors.
Mhm.
And that's it. Nice and easy.
That's what you'd expect.
Just note that amendments to the bylaws can be done by a majority vote. Like a vote in a meeting.
As opposed to
2/3?
2/3,
I didn't say that.
Right.
just note.
I agree with him. I like maximum flexibility.
Especially at the outset, when you really
Yeah.
don't know what this is gonna look like.
Right.
This is gonna be changed, right? I mean, you have to
At some
anticipate this is
point.
gonna be changed in the relatively near future.
Mhm.
They're gonna want to amend this.
As things come up.
As some structure forms around the
Mhm.
tab.
Yeah, good job.
Nice work, Trevor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Very
Trevor.
nice.
I didn't do it, some of the lawyer did.
Thanks for facilitating.
All right. Pretty much it. Our next meeting, with Hurwit though, we need to schedule.
Yeah, so I'll take this and kind of put some notes together and send it back and then
Mhm.
see what next steps wanna take.
Okay. And yeah. Probably sooner rather than later, I guess. Is not concerned, certainly.
When is our next meeting?
Our next meeting
What's
is,
the purpose of our next meeting? What, don't we have to wait until?
well, hopefully the small group will meet with Hurwit before that.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
then
Good.
we'll file with the state for a
Mhm.
name and.
Everybody will have to come to sign.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes, that would be the next meeting, you would think.
I think that's July 28th.
We shouldn't be setting that meeting up until we get this done.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point, yeah.
Yeah, well, we want to make sure that it's all done before the 28th, so we can come and sign it.
Correct.
yeah.
So if it's not done by the I mean, I'm just
Yeah,
thinking,
then we're gonna have
4th of
to-
July, you're in the summer, people.
Well,
See,
that's why we're paying them.
yes.
Why is the internet slow here?
It's hot.
They're gonna need addresses, et cetera, to put in for the signature signing parties.
Yes, theoretically, I understand.
Yeah, 28th. I got it on my phone.
But the next meeting is predicated upon stuff done
Make a motion.
in advance of that.
Are you setting the
Yeah.
meeting without
We have to
the
do
document?
Are we ready to leave?
Move
Yes.
for adjournment.
Wait a minute.
Everyone is sending their address to Vince.
Yeah, just send it to me where you want.
The only address I've ever had, so you might as well just use my existing one.
Okay. I'm sure I have it, but
Well, your wife does.
I know she does. Sure. Want something different?
I just wanna make sure we have everything ready before we
Right.
set the meeting.
Yeah, that's
I don't wanna set a meeting and then not have.
And then,
not
We can set it,
have
we
ready.
can set it now, and then if we need to move it, we can move. it.
Yeah,
I'd rather reserve the date,
yeah,
just for like the room and everything else.
okay.
So when is it?
28th.
28th.
Well, that's our next board meeting.
That's our next regular
We'll
schedule.
do a scheduled meeting.
So it's the
So we wanna
Hurwitz
Meet
meeting.
with Hurwit before that.
Correct. But we can't set that yet until I get it.
Okay.
Okay, so you will have.
And once you've done that, you tell us all that, oops, we're gonna have to move the meeting to whatever.
And that's fine.
Yeah,
Yep.
of course.
Okay,
So it's a fluid date
Until it isn't.
until it isn't.
It's more like a hold for now.
okay.
Okay.
All right.
Any other business?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.
I have the state
28th.